And to kick off, we're going to be looking at our first impressions. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to our first character. I mentioned we've got a few characters that we're going to be helping out with the content today. And our first character here is Fiona. Now, you can probably see that I'm using my faithful magic whiteboard today. For those that are connected with me on LinkedIn will notice that is a weekly series featured every Wednesday with the magic whiteboard. But I digress. So Fiona here is bloody brilliant at first impressions. Maybe not in this picture with my A-level art skills. Yep, you heard that right. But Fiona does 5 things to really help make her have this great first impression on these calls. And the first thing that she does is she focuses on the other person. And what I mean by focus is that she does her research beforehand. So she looks at what's important for this person at the moment. What are they posting about? What's going on in their industry right now? And she'll prepare a series of questions that she can then use in that conversation. So really important in terms of focusing it. But ultimately, what Fiona does is that she arms herself with knowledge going into that conversation. So she'll be feeling much more confident beforehand as well. The next thing that Fiona does is she imitates the other person. Now, I can write this here. We've all heard of the concept of mirroring someone else to build that rapport. I'm sure we have. Pop it in the chat if that's sort of a familiar thing for you to do. So you mirror the other person, it tends to subconsciously build this rapport with them. Now, this is super tough online because actually what we can mirror is a much smaller window, often just heads and shoulders, right? So try to get a bit creative with this building rapport online because you want to be thinking about what language are these people using? What language is the person that I'm on this call with using? Are they coming across quite formal or are they a little bit more relaxed? Because if we can meet them where they're at, again, we're going to get that connection a lot quicker. It's going to be more impactful and hopefully we can get into that conversation mode a lot quicker. So think about imitating that person and how we can do that as well. The next thing that Fiona does, and I've mentioned this already, you've given me some of your openers, your email openers, conversation openers earlier on, but she thinks about what her opening sentences are. So I call these openers. Often, and you probably do this as well, we do check in to check that we can see and hear each other all okay. That's fair enough. The first thing we want to do is check that the tech is working. But then when we dive into the conversation, try to think of something a little bit more thought-provoking than maybe just, so, how's your day? Let's get into the conversation as well as we possibly can. It might be that you go into the conversation, you jump online and you think, wow, this person's really got their home office setup going great. So it might be, oh, Jenna, I can see you've got your home office setup going really strong at the moment. And then they progress and probably tell you how they built it and get them talking about themselves. Or it might be that you notice from the email exchanges you've had beforehand that things are bloody hectic for them right now. So you might comment on that. John, it seems to be really hectic for you at the moment. How are things going? So you're picking up on something particular to get them chatting rather than just a bit more of a general, how's your day? Let's kind of slowly get into this conversation. So more thought-provoking openers are always going to go a long way. The next thing that Fiona considers is her non-verbal communication. And what we mean ultimately by non-verbal communication is our body language, right? And again, we've got a much smaller window to play around with online. In person, we can use our hand gestures a lot more. We can really make a big impact with our body language. We can still do that online. We just need to be a bit more creative with it. So Fiona looks at what message is her body language giving off. And so often we can say one thing and our body language is screaming something completely different. So if you asked me how I was and I said, yeah, I'm great. I'm really great. I've got my arms folded, I look a bit pissed off and I haven't given you very good eye contact. It's a massive contradiction. So if I had to narrow down 3 things that's going to make more impact with our non-verbal communication and what we want to be focusing on, the first one would be our eye contact. It's like the 2020 challenge of eye contact and looking at our camera lens instead of looking at the people below us on the screen. Just pop a yes or agreement in the chat if you're in that same boat. It's really difficult to look at the camera lens because that's what's making direct eye contact with the person on the call. When we're looking down, we haven't got that as much. Babs, yes, we're getting there, absolutely. And it is tough. And actually last week's Whiteboard Wednesday that I did touched on this topic exactly. And someone commented and asked a question of, but how can I keep reminding myself to look at the lens? It's so difficult. It really depends on what works for you. You might want to cut out an arrow, maybe on a post-it, you literally put an arrow to remind yourself to look at the lens. You might want to print out a face or a few faces, an audience to put just behind the lens so it feels like you're talking to someone still rather than just sort of ignoring them down there. You might even want to print out the face of the person you're going onto the call with. That might be a little bit strange to print out faces of everyone we speak to, but whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you. Try to get that eye contact with the camera as much as possible. The next thing I'd say with our non-verbal communication is thinking about our framing. And a lot of this stuff we've heard about over the last several months, but it's always great to have a bit of a reminder and just a check-in to consciously make an effort with these things. So often it will be our head and shoulders in the shot. Try not to be that person who has a floating head and loads of space above them. To make impact, we want to fill the screen as much as we can without coming too close. So I don't know what is too close. If I keep coming close to the camera, you're probably thinking, Jenna, please back off now, that's way too close. Or what's too far away? Now, you'll probably see more of me than you would normally in a normal online conversation just because of how I set up the space here. But think about your framing and also your hand gestures, which brings me on to sort of that final point of non-verbal communication is how are you going to get your passion and excitement across online? We've almost got this barrier, everyone's on their laptops and there's so many distractions. We almost need to go a little bit over the top with our hand gestures and our body language to engage that other person that we're speaking to. So think about how you're getting passion across in your facial expressions, this smaller window, using your hand gestures if that works for you. How are you really getting that other person engaged and excited with what you're saying? So another thing to think about there. And the final thing that Fiona does is she looks at the area. I do apologise for my writing a little bit, but she looks at the area around her. And this is really looking at the background. What's going on behind us? Because if what's going on behind us is more either exciting or distracting than ourselves, then we're going to lose that person. That first impression is basically them thinking, oh my goodness, how messy or how weird what's going on behind them. Literally last week I was on a Zoom call, mini group training session, and one of the facilitators, no word of a lie, had stacks and stacks of paper all around his desk. You could even see some coming up from the floor. I had a really good insight into his office. And all I could think about was how disorganized this room was and how could he work in that situation. Now, I'm a super organized person, self-confessed organization freak for sure. So it probably bothered me more than the average person. But I didn't hear or get a word he was saying because I was so focused on the mess that was behind him. So maybe you might need one of those physical Wayfair screens that I got that makes you look like you're in a wooden box. There are others available. I obviously just chose quite badly. And also think about, a lot of people talk to me about virtual backgrounds. I feel like virtual backgrounds are a bit of a game changer for better or for worse. For me, I kind of sway towards the latter because back in March and April, it was hilarious to be on a beach or to have a fridge full of beer behind us. But we're several months in now, we've kind of moved on from that. So just make sure it's not distracting, whatever it is that's going on behind you, and it's professional enough as well. So those are the things that Fiona does to make a great first impression.
If you found this video useful, check out even more ways to upgrade your impact by subscribing to my YouTube channel.